of service fee. We currently pay a total of $61.69 for a 32-gallon tote and 64-gallon recycle cart and no other services, and this is for 2 months. So probably a little over $30 a month. And this ends up being about $737 annually. And he also wants to know, how will the knowledge of what to recycle change with organized garbage?
Okay, so in terms of the cost aspect, like I mentioned before, we don't have the proposed cost from haulers yet, since we did just start this yesterday. We will bring that information to the community as soon as we can, and that's where really getting that information from bills from residents is extremely helpful. I can tell by looking at your details that you do pay right close to average for your services, perhaps even a little more with not having other services. We really have a lot of difference in the rates that residents are paying with residents who have the same hauler, as well as residents who have different haulers. I have seen bills with people paying as low as $300 a year for services, and as high apparently as close to $750. So, and that's not to say that, that can be people with the same exact cart size and same exact services. I'm not necessarily comparing someone who has a 32-gallon trash cart to someone who has a 96-gallon trash cart. We can see based on these invoices what size carts people have and what services they have, and we still see these large discrepancies also that are showing up in fees, such as fuel recovery fees, environmental recovery fees, recycling offset costs, recycling recovery. They are wide variety of names that they fall under, but a lot of times those fees are increased a lot, and residents don't necessarily understand how they are involved in rates and things like that. So I see even people's bills jumping from quarter to quarter, which it's a lot to try and manage and understand. So unfortunately, I can't exactly say what the cost would be at this time. How would the knowledge of what to recycle change? It really depends. Right now, haulers do their own education. So some people receive an annual guide with a list of acceptable items to recycle. Some people don't receive any education from their hauler on what to recycle. I constantly get calls from people who are confused about the numbers, on plastic containers and things like that. So really having an organized system where the city is able to help provide that education, and haulers are all on the same page about what is recycled in Richfield, which is usually haulers accept most of the same materials anyway, but the education isn't there, and the city isn't able to help educate residents as much, which is really something that most cities do with recycling education. So it's not necessarily that different materials would be accepted under an organized system, but it's having better education so that I know that what Aspen accepts is also what Waste Management accepts, is also what Republic accepts, and so on. I hope that answers that question.
And I would note too, if we do go to organized collection and people want to opt into curbside organics and composting, because the organics material will be taken to a facility that can take quite a few different things than you would be able to put in a backyard compost. We'll be able to take unbleached napkins, paper towels, pizza boxes, a lot of things.
Egg cartons.
A lot of other things. So when you look at our waste stream, I think the goal will be, by providing curbside organics recycling, have more people doing these behaviors, we'll pull more of this out of our waste stream and what goes to the incinerator or the landfill. All right, so hopefully that helped answer your question, Ken. The next one is a comment/question from Jeff, and he says, regarding road wear impacts, garbage trucks from 4 haulers are in each street one day each week versus I saw almost 50 FedEx, UPS, Postal Service, and Amazon truck trips down my street just yesterday. Can you point to this group a study that attributes garbage trucks to the largest contributor to residential road wear and tear? Or is the problem we are attempting to solve only based on the fact that a garbage truck is heavy?
Thanks for your comment, Jeff. I think this is a really good point. We do have a lot of large vehicles on our roads that do contribute to things like road wear and tear. I don't know if necessarily road wear and tear is the issue in Richfield, that the size of the issue in Richfield that it is in other cities, because of the way our roads are constructed and things like that. We do have thicker roads, so it's not necessarily, it's more the number of trucks and the pollution and, disruption to residents, I think, than the biggest problem being road wear and tear. I can look up that MPCA study and put it on the website. I don't think it explicitly states that garbage trucks are the largest contributor to road wear and tear, but it might. I don't think the problem we are attempting to solve is only based on the fact that garbage trucks are heavy. You're right that there are a lot of heavy trucks out there. Garbage trucks with all of the waste inside are perhaps heavier than certain parcel delivery trucks. But yeah, it's one of the biggest differences is that there is a precedent and a statute for doing something like organized collection for garbage, right? There is no precedent or statute for organizing delivery trucks. So I think part of this is looking at the tools that we have for problems like, the amount of trucks in general, not specifically garbage trucks, and saying, okay, well, here's something that we can look at for this. And it also checks the boxes of being an economically beneficial initiative for the city. There are a lot of other things besides just reducing the number of trucks, but that does seem to be a point that residents bring up fairly frequently. So thank you.
The next question is from Brinkhouse and wants to know, how will the billing work, self-pay or pay the city? And I think what the city is looking to do if they decide to go to organized collection is the billing would be done self-pay through the hauler. And then he also wants to know, he or she wants to know, how will you determine the hauler for an area?
Right. So I think we kind of addressed that earlier with the phone caller. Basically, the hauler's market share at a certain point, it's 6 months before the process starts, is then taken into account, and the market share, or the city is divided based on that market share, and then the city and the haulers work to divide the city into areas. So the percentage of households that a hauler serves is already decided, and that's laid out through state statute. But the areas have yet to be determined.
Thank you for the question, Brinkhouse. The next one is a comment from Ollie Stoker. It says, I think this is great. I wanted Richfield to move to organize for years. I've written letters to the editor in the past, etc. I'm very excited that we are finally moving along towards this goal.
Thank you, Ollie.
Mary Stratton has asked, how will this impact single family homes versus multi-level HOAs, rentals, and businesses? Also, what will happen if our HOA is in the middle of a contract? What will happen to the contract that is in place?
Mary, that's a great question. So I want to clarify, and I should have done this before, my apologies, that organized residential collection only refers to properties that are serviced by a residential hauler. So for our program, it will include single family residences up to 3-unit residences like a triplex. So if you live in a building that has more than 3 units, this program does not apply to your building, because usually those buildings are served by commercial haulers. So with our friends and residents that live in Gramercy or Woodlake Point or that's where Ray lives. Other condos and large, basically any apartment building that's larger than 4 units, this does not apply. There are goals in our climate action plan in the future that we are hoping to help expand recycling and organics collection with those buildings and with commercial haulers, but there's not an organized system to organize collection for commercial entities or haulers at this point. So if your HOA is in the middle of the contract, you'll just keep going the normal route. we will be looking at options for if, you know, certain smaller buildings, like 4-unit buildings, want to opt in. That might be an option. We have to discuss that with haulers. But with the larger buildings, they will continue to get serviced by commercial haulers with dumpsters and all that fun stuff.
Okay, Kent has a comment. Where can I see the data on the rates from other cities you have looked at?
That's a great question, Kent. I will put that data on the Richfield Organized Collection website next week.
And I think right now we have data from St. Paul, Minneapolis, Bloomington, St. Louis, St. Anthony. You know, I know St. Louis Park has been organized for a long time. I want to say Rockford.
Yep, some of these cities will have to annotate because some of them are served by a single hauler. St. Louis Park is served entirely by Waste Management. So when you have a single hauler for an entire city, you get the lowest rates as opposed to the level of organized collection that we're required to look at by state statute, which is working with all haulers. You still get lower rates than an open system, but it's kind of a tiered approach. So when I put that information on the website, I'll put all the other information that will help explain organized collection in other cities too.
Yeah, the next question is one we got last night. It's a great question from Brinkhouse. Will there be an annual cleanup like they have in Bloomington?
Bloomington's cleanup system is interesting. We are looking at a system for bulky item collection, which is usually what that is called. We don't have the specifics yet, and that is a very strong piece that we're looking for feedback from residents on if a pay per item price would be more beneficial. A lot of the feedback I've been getting is that residents don't want to have that service mandated in the contract, obviously, because if they don't have bulky items, which Bloomington's contract price is mandated, everyone pays in no matter what. They don't want to, residents don't want to pay for a service that they might not use, which is understandable. So we're looking at a variety of ways, whether it's paying per item, having, you know, a certain number of items included in a contract. So you're paying for it, but every resident would get up to 3 items or something like that. And really working to see what residents in Richfield want. There are also options to have things like drop-off events. So we're really trying to figure out what system would be best for Richfield. But Bloomington's annual cleanup is an interesting system, and I think they're looking at different ways to deal with it. They've done different changes in the past to kind of transform it along the way. So yeah, I think residents pay $9 a month for that. I am not 100% sure, but it's not a cheap service to run.
Okay. Thank you for that question. John Graybow has a question. When would you like us to send our most recent garbage bill?
Thanks, John. You can send it right now. I'm analyzing them as I get them. So there's really not a hard deadline on them. We will use them throughout the negotiation process, and the more data that we get is better to help negotiate the best rates for Richfield. So you can send those to me. My email was on the mailer. It is also on the website. And it's basically it's R and then my last name, Lindholm @richfieldmn.gov. So if you are on the computer, you can see that on WebEx. But it's also on the website as well. So send it to me whenever you'd like, and that's great. Thank you.
Another good question from Ali. Is there any way to get a reduced rate if we have very minimal need for garbage service? Our recycle container is about 3/4 full every 2 weeks, but most weeks we only have a small brown grocery paper bag of actual garbage.
Thanks, Ollie. First of all, that's great to hear. You know, it's great when people are able to kind of work on reducing the amount of trash that they have. We are looking at a lot of services that can help those who aren't producing a large amount of waste. One of them is bringing every other week collection of trash to the city, which is currently not permitted by city code for public health reasons. And so we are working to include an every other week rate in this proposed contract, which would mean that if you opt into that service, you would get a 32-gallon or approximately 32-gallon size trash container, which is usually the smallest one that you can have. And then that would get emptied every other week. So that would also obviously have a reduced rate going along with it. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of the bare minimum that most cities have. I have heard residents asking, I had one resident ask me if monthly trash collection was an option. And, we start to get into, more public health things. And unfortunately, that is against city code. But the idea is if you are participating in things like organics collection and you are not putting food in your trash where it can rot, then it is less of or not a public health concern to have a garbage can full of plastic or non-recyclable paper or metal or things like that in your garage or outside your garage for 2 weeks because there's nothing actively rotting in it. So we're working on getting options like that, and in that way, yes, you would receive a reduced rate.
All right, thanks for that question. The next one is a comment from Donna Drummond. She says, I'm very much in support of organized garbage for all the reasons cited. The city has repaved almost all of the residential streets in the last few years, and all these garbage recycling yard-based trucks are damaging our beautiful new streets.
Thanks, Donna. I do think one thing I forgot to mention that's important is as we see warmer winters and increased freeze and thaw cycles throughout winter, that is one thing that we do know is damaging our streets more. It's less of the wear and tear of the trucks necessarily, but it is an effect we are seeing because of our warmer warmer winter and increased precipitation. That's not necessarily snow, but we get that rain, that sleet, that freezing, that freezes into ice and then thaws. And so our public works department has noticed the effect of that on our roads as well.
Yeah, I do want to mention if people would like to just ask questions, you can just type in the chat, like comment or question if you don't want to type it out. And then when we come to you, you can just unmute yourself and ask too if you don't want to type. That's always an option. A question from Kent, will organics be part of a weekly pickup? And the answer would be yes, just because of the nature of organics will start to get stinky and potentially, attract flies and things like that in different parts of the year. So that they would be a weekly pickup, organics. Next one's just a comment. Our alleys are wrecked because of the garbage trucks. That's from Brinkhouse. Mackenzie says, we are very much in support of organized pickup. We live on a corner and we've seen garbage trucks backing up down our block dangerously, doing 3-point turns and speeding around our streets. The next comment is from David Wright. I realize that costs are not yet known. Some households will pay less, but some will pay more. Why should costs go up for any households because of organized collection?
That's a great question, David. And I think it's something that, we don't necessarily always get into the nitty gritty about. It is important to, like I said before, remember that the majority of households do pay less in an organized system. And I can get the average statistic from the MPCA of how many in a city usually pay less. In other cities, I believe Maplewood, over 80% when they organized, over 80% paid lower rates. Why should costs go up for any household because of organized collection? So how a trash system works in an open system. Some people, you get your rates and they're not always the same as your neighbor who might have the same hauler and the same cart sizes and everything, right? So some people, when their rates start to increase, call their hauler to get it lowered back down. And that's how negotiation works in an open system. Some people do not. Some people pay the bill no matter what it says. They don't look at the itemized breakdown. And I know that because I've had residents tell me that. And that's fine. That's all your own choice. However, trash continues to get more expensive to dispose of. And just, as everything keeps rising in price, right? Trash is no exception. We have landfills that are filling up. We have incinerators that are reaching capacity. We had an incinerator, Great River Energy shut down I believe, at the beginning of 2019. So that was like one less place for trash to go to get incinerated, which is only slightly, it's more preferred than landfilling, but it's still not the greatest way to deal with waste. So we have these rising costs at these facilities. You have to pay to bring trash to an incinerator. You have to pay to dump trash at a landfill. And so if you are a resident who is able to negotiate lower rates year after year, even with the prices increasing, someone has to pay that increase. And so currently in an open system, that goes to residents who don't necessarily understand their bill, or don't understand or don't have the time or ability to call haulers to barter down, to negotiate down. And so that's why rates would go up for some households in organized collection, because there are currently some households in every city, Richfield's no exception, that pay far less than the cost of disposing their trash. They are getting a deal, right? And so there are people that are not getting that deal. And so the goal of one of the goals of organized collection is to bring that discrepancy, and equalize it more, so that everyone's paying, for their waste, and that reflects how much it costs to dispose of this waste. And that's kind of why prices would go up for some people. I hope that makes sense.
All right, the next question it's a comment from Kent. And he notes, I would think you can get the data from each hauler for rates for people and what they're paying in Richfield.
That's a good point. I don't know if any city that is organized has tried to ask for rates from the haulers. I also don't know if that is a concern on the haulers' perspective for data and privacy and things like that. I have talked to other cities in the past, and haulers are less likely to separate out just based on privacy concerns. It's different if we have residents sending us the bills, but that's a good point.
Another question is, who is on the committee for assessing the trash options in Richfield? And that's kind of a multi-tier answer. To initially start, we had kind of full conversations with the council, and we met with the haulers, and the staff is our city manager, Katie Rodriguez, Rachel, our sustainability specialist, myself, and the city attorney. We've also been working with our sustainability commission, bringing questions and feedback to the commission that meets monthly, and getting feedback from residents that are on that commission. And then our negotiations will be done mainly with myself, Rachel, the city manager, and the city attorney. And then all the feedback we get from residents and from negotiations, we're going to be compiling that and giving that information to our council to make the best decision on this process and moving it forward.
I also think it's important to mention that we talk to a lot of other departments and staff in the city, like I mentioned before, with public works, and learning how the variety of trucks are affecting our roads and things like that. So we bring in other aspects of the city based on their expertise and how it relates to trash collection in general. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're involved in negotiations or anything like that.
Okay, the next one is a comment from Joseph Miller, and he's in support of every other week plan, and he's the only person at his home right now, and that would make sense to have every other week service.
Mm-hmm.
Ken's question is, how is organic different than compostable like we do now?
That's a good question, Ken. I'm going to assume, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you were talking about how is something like backyard composting different than curbside organics, which is also referred to as industrial composting. And Amy started to talk about that earlier, but there are quite a few things in both food waste and non-food waste that are different. So in backyard composting, I think it's not even allowed by code, but it's definitely for other reasons not advisable to have things like meat or dairy or other like paper items that don't easily break down in your backyard compost. Obviously for meat and dairy, as they decompose, it attracts animals, and you don't want that. It's also a health kind of a health problem because backyard compost piles don't heat up to the temperature that industrial composting does. So it can be a little dicey with what you're putting in there. And so for industrial organics, that's where we see things like delivery pizza boxes being accepted, and paper egg cartons and tissues and paper towels and Q-tips and toothpicks and all of this stuff. You know, we have the list on our organics webpage if you're interested. But it has a lot more. So if you do backyard composting, chances are you're throwing away some of those things I've mentioned, or recycling them, or maybe reusing them. But there's just a lot more that industrial composting has. And we have heard from residents as well who are interested in having curbside collection, you know, as they get older and don't want to have a backyard compost pile to deal with, or even, you know, have anything besides the convenience of a cart at their house to put their organics in. So there are a lot of other different reasons why curbside organics, you know, are more helpful in a lot of ways.
The next question is from John Graybow. And before we answer it and read it, I just want to note the time. We're at 4:53. So we have a little less than 10 minutes left. So if you had a question, if you'd like to ask it, just put question or comment. And then when we call your name, you can unmute yourself and ask, or type it in. We're hopeful to get to what we have listed there. And again, if for some reason we don't get to your question or comment and you'd like to chat with Rachel or I, feel free to reach out to us via phone or email, or you can join the next Learn and Listen session, which is Tuesday, December 22nd at 2 o'clock. And hopefully we'll get everything answered. And this is a long process, so you can feel free, you know, really anytime in the next several months to reach out and chat with us about it. So the next question is from John Graybaldo. His question is, how is the size of receptacles determined in a new system of collection? And does everyone get the same size receptacle?
This is a great question, John. So the size of receptacles is determined by the individual and the household. You choose what size you want, just like in an an open system. There might be a default size if, you know, that's decided. Like sometimes in organized systems, yard waste is defaulted to be a 96 gallon to have a larger can. That doesn't mean you are required to have that size. But, you know, for all systems, the size is usually determined by residents. Again, another exception might be organics, because really no one produces more organics in a week than a 32-gallon container can hold. But again, that depends on conversations with the haulers and things like that. So in terms of mostly trash and recycling, each resident does decide on their size receptacle. So no, not everyone gets the same size, just like now. And that will be a process that's determined, you know, how we communicate and get that information from residents about the size of container that they would like. That would happen through the transition process. So, yep, thank you.
All right, the next question is from David Wright. And he says, we make one phone call each year to talk and negotiate our price, a 96-gallon toter and 96-gallon recycle with no composting, as we do our own composting. We paid $240 this past year. That was an increase of 5% from the previous year. We agreed to pay the 5% more instead of the proposed 10%, as we understood that prices go up, and that is fair. So are we penalized because others choose not to make a phone call?
So in terms of, you know, price increase, that 5% and 10% is interesting. In an organized system, the annual escalators usually are not. I've never seen an annual escalator of 10%. I rarely might have seen an annual escalator of 5%. They're usually smaller than that anyway. So it's, again, this is a good example of, yes, you are able to call and negotiate your price, but with that size of cart and that pricing, it doesn't necessarily fall in line with what other residents are paying. So we're not we're not saying that you're being penalized. Like, that's not the goal of the system. The goal of the system is to try and make sure that everyone is receiving, this level of service that you've been able to receive at such a low price. And then that's how the city uses the power of negotiating on behalf of a body of residents to achieve more truly competitive prices. But not, like you mentioned, not everyone does choose to make a phone call or has the knowledge of negotiating a lower price or things like that. So in terms of resident advocacy, the city understands the power of negotiation and is trying to look at options to help advocate for all residents. Proposed pricing comes back from haulers and bringing that back to the community to see how your pricing compares to that.
Okay, I think the next one's from Kent. I think it was just a follow-up comment about his question about organics.
Oh,
and
yep, the drop off at home.
I think he was, yep.
Yeah.
I think he was just noting.
So then, Kent, you're correct that the drop off is a form of industrial composting, and that was a grant project that the city got the money from Hennepin County to start running that program and seeing how successful organics has been. So curbside is no different than the drop off, and that's something that we'll have to look at as we consider the system. Certain cities, before they had curbside organics, had drop offs. And then they transitioned to using the drop-offs for those larger multifamily buildings, like I mentioned before with Mary's question. So it's just we'll have to look at how organics works out because that is currently a grant funded program.
Thank you. The last one is a comment from Tony Vivas. He noted, "Thanks so much for the session and helpful information. I'm definitely in favor of organized collection. I'll email Rachel a copy of my current invoice from Republic. And if anybody else on, would like to send a copy of it to Rachel, that's helpful for us to better understand the pricing discrepancies across the community."
That's great. I put my email in the chat for those who are attending the session, if that helps. Thanks, Tony, for sending in your bill. And if anyone else, I think other people mentioned that they would do the same. So we really do appreciate it. It does help as we consider organized collection and look to see the competitive pricing that we can get for residents in Richfield. So this is perfect timing.
Yeah. So we're right at 5 o'clock. And if you think of other questions or comments, like I said, please feel free to reach out to us. But we really appreciate people's feedback. We, from last night, tonight, and then Tuesday, we're starting to see some general questions people have and concerns that we need to do more research on and think through more to bring the best information to our council on this process. But we really value your time and your engagement with this. So thank you.